Welcome to Form and Analysis Online. This is Music 331, and this is a course that is concerned with the structures of musical masterpieces that were composed during the Common Practice period. And so we're especially going to focus on those forms that are associated with the sonata cycle. So we will begin the semester looking at the shortest units of music, and then we'll progress from there to talk about basic forms that are described as simple forms and compound forms. But before we get into all that, I want to mention that this is the textbook that we'll be using, called Structure and Style. The author is Leon Stein. It's the expanded edition. Right now, it's presently available online. If you do a Google search and just write in Structure and Style, Leon Stein, this is the first that comes up. You might put in their PDF. These things have a tendency to come and go, but at any rate, you can certainly look for it online. The bookstore will have copies of the text. I believe there is one copy in the library, but you do need to have access to the text. And we will definitely organize the course according to the way that that book is organized. So, what I'd like to do right now is just to go over a little bit the way that we will organize the semester. So you already received the email from me about the website, formandanalysis.weebly.com, and the password to get here. And you can click around a little bit on the website just to familiarize yourself with where things are located. I'll be referencing those throughout the term. And so that is something that you should check frequently, because I will post different announcements and things about the class on the home page. And just be aware that this will be the website for the course, and it is not on Blackboard. So now what I'd like to do next is to talk a little bit about the syllabus. And so I emailed that to you as well, and but it's also available on the website. So the course is organized into these different units that I have listed on the syllabus. And so the way that the testing will occur is that we will have a 50-point quiz coming up here week after next, which covers the beginning lectures and the first 6 chapters of the textbook. So what we'll be talking about here is the background for the development of tonal forms. So I'll talk about the concept of tonal architecture and about basic approaches to formal construction in the Baroque era and Classical era. And then we'll discuss a lot of terminology, because that's a lot of the beginning part of the course has to do with recognizing these small patterns and being able to use appropriate terminology to describe what it is that you see and hear. So some of the other outcomes of the course have to do with being able to analyze quickly the forms that are associated with the sonata cycle. And so the sonata cycle develops in the Common Practice period, and you start to see works like chamber trio sonatas of Corelli, And you see concertos that emerge that are works that are for instrumental combinations. And so this is something that then in the classical era becomes much more specific in terms of what you are going to expect to find in a composition by the great masters, Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven. And so their symphonies and sonatas and string quartets, you will find these basic compound forms that are described with terms like minuet and trio, scherzo trio, different rondo types, theme and variation, and then sonatina and sonata allegro. And so those are the basic types of forms that we'll be looking at. So yes, you'll have to be able to recognize those. You will learn to recognize things that are typical and expected in the way that a composer structures the work, and then things that therefore would be considered as unusual and unique to that particular work, which is a basic element of musical style. So the way that a composer organizes the material and the way that the different sections form various proportional relationships has a lot to do with the musical era, the tacit assumptions of that era. And so we'll talk here in the next video about that approach that classical composers take to form in comparison to Baroque composers and in comparison to Romantic composers. So some of the things you'll have to analyze quickly are key centers within the context of form. And so we'll talk about the basic principle of tonal architecture, and then how you're looking for certain keys associated with the different sections of these works. And the tests will be a combination of description of terminology, giving definitions of terms, recognizing those in examples, and then later in the semester it will be more concerned with doing an analysis on the spot of works that are similar to the works that we've covered in class, to see how well you can apply those. So we'll have a final exam that, in a sense, is comprehensive in that throughout the semester we'll continue to use the terminology that we're going to talk about at the beginning of the semester, having to do with the shortest units of music like figure, motive, and semiphrase and phrase, and combinations of phrases like periods and phrase groups, double periods, and so forth. Cadence types, we'll continue to use that terminology through the whole semester, but the later tests will just focus on a specific group of forms. So that first test, as I mentioned, is a shorter quiz, and it covers the first 6 chapters, and it has to do with phrase construction, combinations of phrases. But the second test will have to do with the shortest forms in music, which are called simple forms, which is synonymous with the terminology song forms. So we'll be looking at the various types of song forms. So I have summarized for you a handout on the website that gives you those definitions, but that will cover chapters 7 through 10 in the textbook. And so that, and then we'll also cover on that second unit minuet and trio and scherzo and trio. So once we get to those, then I will have for you some worksheets that you will try out your skills, and those will prepare you then for the test. The worksheets will be due, by a certain date, and then, give you some feedback on those. I'll basically give you videos in which then I go through and analyze those works that are covered on the worksheet. And that way you can see where I'm coming from and compare it to then what you initially thought. And then if there are questions, of course, we'll always be discussing those issues. So that's what's covered on that second test. That's 100 points. In total, there are 500 points for the semester. But that second test covers song forms, auxiliary members, which are the connecting passages, like transitions, or opening introduction, or concluding coda or codetta, and so forth. So those will be included in that second test, and then minuet trio and scherzo trio. The third test then, which occurs after midterm, will be on rondo forms, and so that will just exclusively cover the three main types of rondo construction. And then the last test, which is the final exam, is worth 150 points. And that covers theme and variations, so we'll be looking at different types of variation techniques in the Baroque, but then we'll look at the Mozart Crucial 331 first movement of the piano sonata that is in A major. Is a great example of a classical approach to theme and variation construction. And then we'll look at the last movement of the Beethoven Opus 109 piano sonata, so the third movement of that great work, which also is a set of theme and variations. Like the Mozart example, it has 6 variations, which you'll see how much more complex and how much further from the theme Beethoven travels, although there's always a connection with that initial presentation of the theme. And so we'll talk about those two works more in detail, and then we'll be talking about sonatina and sonata allegro. So those forms will be covered, and then there will be a final project in which you're going to analyze a sonata allegro movement of a Beethoven piano sonata. So those are the tests, and how that part of the course is organized. We'll always give you a heads up on when it looks like we're going to have the test, and the tests will be given synchronously. So we'll have reserved this 10:30 Tuesday, Thursday time slot for testing, and of course those will be online and give you lots of directions as far as exactly what to do and how to access that. So just look over the syllabus that you have, and then let me know if you have any questions about anything, and we'll be sure to get everything clear in your mind as far as exactly what is going to happen. So I look forward to working with you. I love this material, this repertoire that we're going to cover. I really feel like that the ability to analyze the organizational aspects of this great literature is something which really gives you an insight into the composer's thought process as far as the way that the emotions which flow from the music, how they're organized in time, and how that is something which is a really important, structural element that you're holding on to as you listen to a work. And so, as you know, as you listen to a work, you're processing many different things at the same time. But this is one intellectual element and framework that you can have as you listen, which will help you to understand, really where a composer is coming from. So hope that you enjoy the course, and look forward to working with you.